When you're gone. Okay. Yali, her divorce had left her emotionally decimated and confused. Unlike me, she had had healthy relationships with men that did love her, and she loved them, but in love was the tricky part. I've said it time and time again, men can date a batch of fantastic women and let them all go because they did not have chemistry. Whereas women feel pressured to marry a good man if they find him. Yali had had a few, but she married an asshole. Ugh. I called them, she whispered. We were in the theater chomping on buttered popcorn and way too big sodas to be called small. We were about to watch Dune Part 2, and I was excited to see if Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya had the romantic chemistry that was as infectious as their sibling chemistry on the red carpets. #movies. What? I said. Yali had been engaged 3 times in her 20s, while I barely dated for at least 3 years straight. Who did you call? I said, stuffing my face. My ex-fiancé, she dropped casually. When it came to narcissists, I not only attracted them, but I accepted them, which I imagine even men can relate to, especially if they had an abusive parent. I had confused people's ability to trauma bond for kindness. Tell me your sob story, and I immediately thought there's no way you would ever hurt me despite knowing pain. There's no way you would want to repeat it, right? You wouldn't make me cry, not when you've cried so much. Well, what did you talk about them? I asked. Asked them what they felt about me, why they felt we broke up, she said, looking directly at the screen that was frozen on a list of promos we clearly could have used for cheaper snacks, had we known. And what did they say? They all said the same thing, she continued, staring to the screen. Yali's what I like to call my mom friend. Every woman has a friend that feels like a version of their mother, that they can actually be friends with, or certainly triggers their mommy wounds. Yali was very similar to my mom, including her impulse to isolate herself when she felt emotionally overwhelmed or too vulnerable before someone. She preferred to be alone in her perceived doom, which made conversations like this one tricky. Clearly, she was ready to open up, but if I ever asked after how she felt about this moment, it never happened. Thus, I was readying for what we will act like never happened to happen. They said that they liked me and that they loved me, but they felt I didn't like me enough to love me with them. She pursed her lips and nodded. Her eyes watered as she continued to stare off into the screen, as if it was replaying those phone calls. Oh, damn, that is perceptive. And they just said that? I declared, surprised. What, were they just carrying that in them the whole time? Wow. I was shocked by their directness and accuracy. It was true. Yali's ex had torn her from the inside out emotionally, to the point that she transformed physically and became really unhealthy. Yali would always speak about her fiancés like good men that she betrayed in not staying with them and choosing to have more adventures and some self-discovery. Now that she was finally ready to settle down, she landed on a loser whom somehow saw that she felt like one. It was nice to hear, constructive criticism, she declared stoically. I was receiving one shock after another. Yali was like my mom, and that criticism was always negative and never constructive. In priding themselves on their intelligence, they refused to believe anyone could play them for dumb, or that they were capable of mistakes, but here they were, with exes that certainly were their dumb mistakes. What are you going to do with that info? Nothing. What can you do but grow? She said, like a one-off. Suddenly she shot up and went to the bathroom, only to return with her eyes puffed and the screen lit by Timothée Chalamet declaring he was Paul Atreides. What? How did he say it? He said it so funny. I am Paul Atreides! I'm Paul Atreides! He said it like that, right? Okay, anyway, let's heal. Let's discuss. I felt with Yali, let me get better lighting. The thing about Yali and this episode is that one thing that I've noted with my older friends and older women is this almost panic to marry. And some of them are able to control the panic, and others are just like immediately. Like they hit 45 and they're like, I'm marrying someone and we're going to try for a baby. Otherwise it's over. And they marry the wrong guy. And the flip side of that is women who are like, okay, I'm still going to wait for the right guy, but that might mean I never have a kid or I have to adopt or, because you age and I think the wonderful thing about being a single woman and kind of what I've noticed about, young women nowadays is we were still raised with that patriarchal mentality of, you got to take care of the man. You got to learn how to cook. You got to learn how to clean, and all while working and getting educated, because that was the whole promise too of opening doors and progress and the steps towards equality, being able to access things we weren't allowed to access before, like health, like education, work. But that still doesn't mean we necessarily got equality. We don't get equal pay. We don't get equally employed. We die more in terms of how the health system treats us. I mean, even tampons are sold by men. They're CEOs. And I think what happened is that in women learning to be so fully self-sufficient, they started approaching dating like men, in that I want to find somebody who services me. I want to find somebody, yeah, sure, I want to find romance and the dream partner, but I understand that that's just Disney, right? And it's beautiful, and if that happens, great, because I do believe in true love. I have witnessed true love. It's real, it's out there. But I also, it just feels like Russian roulette or a game of luck. The people that I have seen that have fallen in love, it was all by chance. They weren't going to go to that party and they went. It just feels so fluid. And that's something that our society in general, beyond race, class, gender, just doesn't teach us how to flow. And I think for a lot of women, we were also raised with men that really did sabotage their women, whether it was physically, emotionally, mentally, financially. The men in my family, even if they were good dads, none of them were good husbands. And that matters. And I think what happened to Yali was that she kind of panicked. And she had these two, how she describes them, fantastic engagements, really long relationships. They were both at least 6 years with these guys that were ready to marry her. One was a high school boyfriend, one was a college boyfriend. And she stayed with them because they were so good to her. But she didn't really have an identity beyond them. So she decided to end these engagements and go on these years of self-discovery. And by the time she kind of came back to the dating game, there was this it was almost like a backlash. She knows herself too well. She's too successful. She's too self-sufficient. Meanwhile, dating men who are like, I'm not going to provide for you. I'm not going to provide. We're splitting this pizza bill. And I think she just panicked and thought, am I going to be alone forever? And that's a really big fear for a lot of women in the dating world right now, especially as they get older and, they go past 25 and Leo DiCaprio just takes them out of his raya. This kind of feeling of, wow, I might really end up alone. And if I go to date, I have to erase certain boundaries because it seems unacceptable. Or I just have to wait it out and find the guy who respects my boundaries. And I might not have kids. I might be too old. I might not be able to carry. I might have to adopt. I might just not want it anymore. I think everybody wants a partner. But what women are measuring right now is they want the right partner. And it's such a cross because, God, when will they show up? It's really scary. It's really, really scary. And I think men kind of trip themselves up because the thing about men is that they move the game. Every oppressor moves the game. And kind of, well, you're the one who decided to give to me. I didn't ask. Well, now women have stopped giving. Well, you should have dated better men. Well, now they're waiting to date a better man. And I always say, when it comes to oppressor-oppressed dynamics, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you say women are too emotional, well, we're keeping our feelings. And I think that has made everyone feel a little lost because there is a level of 1950s archaic ideals that just don't shake as much as reshape. And I think every human being has the right to discover themselves and do what they must to discover themselves, discover how they define happy, discover how they define love. I think the difference is that I've noted is that a lot of women, when they need to heal, they isolate and they say, you know what, I'm not dating. And it's a totally different experience compared to men. We have to come in with a double consciousness. We have to think of safety. We have to, we literally do have to think of safety. And it could just feel really like I'm servicing you and I'm trying to impress somebody that I don't really feel impressed by. I'm trying to comfort somebody that really doesn't like me. There's always this level of servile that we have to be conscious of either kicking out or keeping just out of safety. And I think what happened with Yali is this, again, she panicked and she kind of resented that she did need that time. She traveled, she worked really hard, she learned how to love herself and thought that's exactly what people are going to be attracted to when I go, men are going to be attracted to when I go out to date. And it was quite the opposite. They were like, you're good alone, I'm out. Or they weren't at a level of self-love. And I don't think women, because it's such a different experience dating, I don't think women have the same stamina or energy for the BS that is dating. I find that a lot of men, they date to get an ego boost, instead of healing their wounds in isolation, they heal their wounds via dating, via meeting more people. Whereas women are like, I'm not going to get to know anyone right now. I need to know me because I am carrying patterns that are toxic. She called her exes, which I thought, too, there were so many things that I thought about what she was describing to me. The first was, how bold and brave of her. And also, it's almost like this bravery that comes out of sadness. You're so desperate for answers and to understand why these bad things happen to you, how you could have landed with an asshole after dating a great guy. What happened to me? And I was surprised by their directness. They were like, I gave you the world and you didn't want it. And I understand now. And I think their directness and their accuracy came from one of the things that made Yali panic is that by the time she had met her husband, or now ex-husband, her exes were married and had kids. They were like, okay, well, if you don't want me, I'm going for that dream and I'm going to make it come true. And she bragged about how wonderful they were. And it's also ironically so similar to my mother. My mother had been previously engaged to this guy who was her dream guy, and it just crumbled. And she always remembered him as her one true love, but it was also the same issue of when you meet your one true love at age 20, and you still have parts of you to discover. And I think in my mom's case, she came from a very toxic, traumatizing family. So to have something so good when she still wasn't even processing or fathoming all the pain she was carrying from her family. It's like, it's just not going to work because you don't even know you have pain while maneuvering with it. Certain things you do, certain things you feel, certain things you act upon. All of that is coming from pain that you're still so young and still so in the vicinity of your family, you deny it. Oh no, everything's great, everything's perfect. And I think she too went on this journey of auto-discovery and landed with a con man, aka my dad. And I feel like Yali took it so personal that she didn't love them back and say yes, and was so scared that was her last shot that she made something out of nothing, because this guy was a nothing. And I think that they are at a point in their life where hindsight is 20/20, and they were way more graceful to her because she told me the whole conversation. I'm just telling you like the general story of it. a launch pad. They were very, very graceful. They were like, there's no bad blood. Don't worry about it. I don't feel that way. I don't feel, you didn't lose your chance. And it just, they took it as it wasn't meant to be. And I think it's because they were over the threshold. They had gotten what they wanted. They wanted a family. They wanted a great woman. She said no, so they found another one who said yes. And they had more chemistry and they clicked more. They took it as, you weren't my one, but you will find a one. And Yali took it as, what if you were my one? Because I found this asshole, and he made me feel like I'm no one,